Ambassador Zethkri stood at the viewport of the massive diplomatic vessel, watching the small blue world grow larger as they approached. Earth, such an insignificant planet in such an unremarkable system, yet it had somehow managed to develop faster-than-light travel in record time. The Galactic Council had been watching this species for only 300 of their years, and already they had gone from primitive combustion engines to crude but functional warp drives. "Impressive for such a young race," murmured his aide, Veltar, joining him at the observation deck, "though their technology is still centuries behind ours." Zethkri nodded slowly. The humans had indeed progressed quickly, but they remained woefully behind the established galactic civilizations. Their ships were bulky and inefficient, their weapons primitive. Their understanding of quantum mechanics barely scratched the surface of true knowledge. Still, they had potential. That's why the Council had decided to make contact now, before they became a threat to themselves or others. "Have you prepared the offering?" Zethkri asked, turning away from the viewport. "Yes, Ambassador. The data crystal contains everything they need to advance their civilization by at least 500 years. Clean fusion technology, basic antimatter containment, improved warp field mathematics, and fundamental gravitational manipulation principles. Enough to bring them up to acceptable galactic standards within a few generations." This was standard protocol for newly contacted species. The Galactic Council had learned long ago that it was better to guide primitive civilizations carefully rather than let them stumble blindly through technological development. Too many promising species had destroyed themselves through reckless experimentation or had developed dangerous technologies without the wisdom to use them properly. The offering was carefully calibrated. It would give humanity the tools they needed to become productive members of galactic society while ensuring they remained dependent on more advanced civilizations for higher-level technologies. It was a gentle form of control, but a necessary one. Young species needed guidance, structure, and most importantly, they needed to understand their place in the cosmic hierarchy. As their ship entered Earth's solar system, Zethkri reviewed the intelligence reports on human society one more time. They were a fractious species, divided into numerous competing nations and ideologies. Their history was marked by constant warfare, though they had managed to avoid destroying themselves during their nuclear age, which was encouraging. They showed remarkable adaptability and innovation, but also dangerous tendencies toward aggression and independence. The Council had debated for months about how to approach humanity. Some members argued for a more direct intervention, perhaps even occupation, until they could be properly civilized. Others suggested a slower approach, making contact through their most advanced nations first. In the end, they had chosen the traditional method, a formal diplomatic contact with their governing bodies, followed by the presentation of the offering and an invitation to join the galactic community as junior members. "Ambassador," called the ship's captain over the communication system, "we're receiving multiple signals from the planet's surface. They appear to be attempting communication in several of their primitive languages." "Ignore them for now," Zethkri replied. "We'll land at their designated United Nations facility in their city called New York. I want our arrival to be official and proper." The massive Council ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, its advanced shielding easily deflecting the weak scanning attempts from human satellites. Below, Zethkri could see the sprawling cities of the human civilization, primitive but extensive. Their infrastructure was crude but functional. Their population centers crowded but organized. They were clearly an intelligent species, just young and inexperienced. The landing site had been prepared according to Council specifications, a large open area surrounded by their primitive security forces, with representatives from their various governing bodies waiting nervously behind barriers. Zethkri could see the excitement and fear in their body language even from this height. This would likely be the most significant day in their species' history. As the ship settled onto the designated landing pad with barely a whisper, Zethkri made his final preparations. His translation device was calibrated for multiple human languages, his ceremonial robes were properly arranged, and the offering, a crystalline data storage device containing technologies that would revolutionize human civilization, was secured in its presentation case. "Remember," he told his aide as they walked toward the exit ramp, "we are here to welcome them into the galactic community, but also to establish proper hierarchy. They must understand that they are children in cosmic terms, and children need guidance from their elders." The ramp lowered with a soft hiss, revealing the alien landscape of Earth. The atmosphere was surprisingly pleasant, though the gravity was slightly heavier than Zethkri preferred. A delegation of humans waited at the bottom of the ramp, their primitive clothing and accessories marking them as leaders of their various tribes and nations. One human stepped forward, a middle-aged female with short gray hair and determined eyes. She wore what appeared to be formal attire by human standards. "Welcome to Earth," she said in their dominant language, her words automatically translated by Zethkri's device. "I am Secretary General Chen of the United Nations. We greet you in peace and friendship." Zethkri descended the ramp slowly, projecting the dignity and authority expected of a Galactic Council representative. His species stood nearly 2 meters tall, with elongated limbs and features that most primitive species found imposing. His ceremonial robes rustled softly in Earth's breeze. "Greetings, humans of Earth," he replied, his translator rendering his words in their language. "I am Ambassador Zethkri of the Galactic Council. We have come to welcome your species into the greater galactic community and to offer you the gift of advancement." The human delegation exchanged glances, their excitement barely contained. Secretary General Chen stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the presentation case that Veltar carried. "We are honored by your presence, Ambassador. Humanity has dreamed of this day for generations. We are eager to learn and to take our place among the stars." "Your eagerness is admirable," Zethkri replied. "But understand that joining the galactic community requires patience and humility. Your species has shown promise, but you are still very young in cosmic terms. You have much to learn about technology, diplomacy, and the responsibilities that come with advanced capabilities." He gestured to Veltar, who stepped forward with the presentation case. The crystalline data storage device within glowed softly with stored information. "This offering contains the fundamental technologies your species needs to begin its transition to galactic civilization. Clean energy sources, improved transportation methods, and basic principles of matter manipulation. These gifts will advance your society by centuries, but they come with conditions." Secretary General Chen's expression grew more cautious. "What conditions, Ambassador?" "You must agree to accept Council oversight during your transition period. Advanced technologies require wisdom to use properly, and your species has not yet developed that wisdom. Council advisors will guide your implementation of these technologies and ensure they are used responsibly. Additionally, you will be expected to contribute to galactic society according to your capabilities. Raw materials, labor, and eventually military service when your skills have developed sufficiently." The humans exchanged more glances, and Zethkri could see uncertainty in their expressions. This was normal. Young species often struggled with the reality of galactic hierarchy at first. "How long would this oversight period last?" asked another human, a male with darker skin and suspicious eyes. "That depends entirely on how quickly your species matures," Zethkri replied smoothly. "Some species require only a few generations of guidance. Others need considerably longer. The Velkari, for instance, needed nearly 1,000 years before they were considered ready for full independence." The human delegation huddled together for a quiet conference. Zethkri waited patiently, though he was mildly surprised by their hesitation. Most species were so overwhelmed by the technological offerings that they readily accepted any conditions. Perhaps humans were more prideful than the intelligence reports had suggested. Finally, Secretary General Chen turned back to him. "Ambassador, we appreciate your offer, and we understand the generous nature of this gift. However, we would like to request time to discuss this with our global leadership before making such a momentous decision for our entire species." Zethkri's aide shifted uncomfortably, and Zethkri himself felt a flicker of irritation. This was not how these ceremonies typically proceeded. "Secretary General Chen," he said, his voice taking on a slightly sharper tone, "I fear you may not understand the nature of this situation. This is not a negotiation or a request that requires deliberation. The Galactic Council has decided that humanity is ready for contact and advancement. This offering represents the culmination of careful study and planning. There is no alternative path forward for your species." The human's body language changed subtly, becoming more tense and defensive. Secretary General Chen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "With respect, Ambassador, humanity has always determined its own path. While we are grateful for your offer, we cannot accept external oversight of our civilization without proper consideration and discussion among our people." Zethkri felt his patience beginning to wear thin. In all his years as a diplomat, he had never encountered such stubborn resistance to what was clearly a beneficial arrangement. "Secretary General, you seem to misunderstand your position. Your species has just achieved primitive, faster-than-light travel. Your weapons are crude, your defenses minimal, your understanding of the universe limited. The Council offers you advancement and protection, but these gifts come with responsibilities. You cannot simply pick and choose aspects of galactic civilization that appeal to you while rejecting others." The temperature of the conversation had definitely changed. The human security forces around the landing area were shifting nervously, their primitive weapons at ready positions. Zethkri noted that while their technology was indeed crude, they had impressive numbers of soldiers present. "We appreciate the Council's perspective," Secretary General Chen replied, her diplomatic smile not reaching her eyes. "But humanity will need to discuss this as a unified species before accepting any long-term commitments. Perhaps we could arrange for a temporary exchange. Some of our representatives could visit Council space to learn more about galactic civilization, while your representatives could observe our society to better understand our capabilities and values." This suggestion was almost insulting. The Council had already observed humanity extensively. They knew everything they needed to know about human capabilities, which were limited, and human values, which needed considerable refinement. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Zethkri said firmly. "The Council's decision is final. You will accept the offering and the guidance that comes with it, or you will remain isolated until such time as you develop the wisdom to appreciate what is being offered to you." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. The humans were clearly struggling with the reality of their situation, though Zethkri couldn't understand why. They were being offered technologies that would transform their primitive civilization into something approaching galactic standards. Any rational species would be grateful for such an opportunity. Secretary General Chen looked around at her fellow humans, then back at Zethkri. When she spoke again, her voice was carefully controlled. "Ambassador, I think there has been a fundamental misunderstanding here. Humanity appreciates the Council's interest in our development, but we cannot accept an arrangement that places our species under external control, regardless of the technological benefits offered. We would prefer to develop at our own pace and maintain our independence." Zethkri felt a cold anger building in his chest. The arrogance of these primitives was astounding. They were rejecting not just the offering, but the entire framework of galactic civilization. "You cannot be serious," he said, his translator picking up the edge in his voice. "You would choose to remain in ignorance rather than accept guidance from your betters." The change in the human's demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. Several of the military personnel visibly bristled, and Secretary General Chen's diplomatic mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something harder underneath. "Our betters, Ambassador?" she asked quietly. Zethkri realized he might have made an error in phrasing, but the fundamental point remained valid. The Council civilizations have thousands of years of advancement over your species. It is simply a statement of fact. "I see." Secretary General Chen stepped back slightly, and Zethkri noticed that the human security forces were shifting into more defensive positions around the landing area. "Ambassador," she said formally, "I'm afraid we must decline your generous offer at this time. We thank the Galactic Council for their interest in humanity, but we will continue to develop independently. We hope that in the future we might establish relations on a more equal footing." The rejection was complete and absolute. Zethkri stared at the human delegation in disbelief. In 3 centuries of diplomatic service, he had never encountered such irrational behavior. These primitives were actually refusing advancement and choosing to remain in technological infancy rather than accept proper guidance. "This is most unwise," he said finally. "The galaxy can be a dangerous place for isolated species. The Council's protection has value beyond the technologies we offer." "We understand the risks, Ambassador," Secretary General Chen replied. "But humanity has always preferred the dangers of freedom to the safety of servitude." The word servitude hung in the air like an accusation. Zethkri felt his aide tense beside him, and he struggled to maintain his diplomatic composure. "Very well," he said, gesturing for Veltar to close the presentation case. "The Council's offer will not be extended again. When your species realizes the magnitude of this mistake, do not expect such generous terms to be available." He turned to leave, but Secretary General Chen's voice stopped him. "Ambassador, before you go, we have something we'd like to offer you in return." Zethkri paused, curious despite his anger. What could these primitives possibly offer that would be of interest to a galactic civilization? "We've prepared a small gift of our own," she continued, "something that represents the best of human achievement and our hopes for peaceful contact with other species." A human aide stepped forward carrying a small metallic disc. It was obviously primitive technology, probably some form of data storage similar to their ancient optical media. This contains a selection of human music, art, literature, and scientific achievements. "We thought you might be interested in learning about our culture." The gesture was almost touchingly naive, as if crude human art and primitive science could be of any value to advanced galactic civilizations. Still, diplomatic protocol suggested he should accept the token graciously. "Very well," he said, gesturing for Veltar to take the disc. "The Council may find it educational." As they walked back up the ramp to their ship, Zethkri could feel the eyes of the human delegation on their backs. The entire situation had been a disaster from a diplomatic perspective. The Council would not be pleased with humanity's response. "Should we prepare a subjugation report?" Veltar asked quietly as they entered the ship. Zethkri considered this. Subjugation was always an option for species that refused to join galactic civilization voluntarily, but it was expensive and time-consuming. Humanity's primitive technology meant they posed no immediate threat to established civilizations. "Not yet," he decided. "Let them remain isolated for a few more generations. Perhaps when they realize the futility of their position, they'll be more receptive to reason." As their ship lifted off from Earth's surface, Zethkri took one last look at the blue world below. The humans had made their choice, and it was the wrong one. But that was their problem now. He had no way of knowing that this moment would be remembered as the day humanity chose its own path among the stars, or that the primitive disk, now sitting in their ship's storage compartment, contained something that would fundamentally change the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be human. The offering had been rejected, but another kind of exchange had begun. Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the holographic display floating above her desk, showing the latest intelligence reports from the outer colonies. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council's visit to Earth, and the response from humanity had been nothing short of extraordinary. "Show me the Mars shipyard construction again," she commanded her AI assistant. The display shifted to show the red planet, but now it was barely recognizable. Massive orbital platforms surrounded Mars like metallic rings, with thousands of spacecraft in various stages of construction. The shipyards had been built in record time using a combination of human engineering and salvaged alien technology from a Council surveillance probe that had mysteriously suffered a technical malfunction near Jupiter. Elena smiled grimly at that memory. The probe's malfunction had been carefully orchestrated by human cyber warfare specialists who had spent months analyzing Council communication patterns. When the probe had been recovered by a human salvage crew, its advanced manufacturing systems and material databases had provided exactly the technological boost humanity needed. "Ma'am," her assistant's voice interrupted her thoughts, "Director Harrison is here for your appointment." "Send him in." James Harrison entered the office carrying a thick folder of classified documents. As director of the Global Defense Initiative, he had been working around the clock since the Council's ultimatum to prepare humanity for what everyone knew was coming. "How are we looking, James?" Elena asked as he settled into the chair across from her desk. "Better than expected, but probably not good enough," he replied honestly. "The shipyard construction is ahead of schedule. We've managed to reverse engineer enough Council technology to upgrade our defensive capabilities significantly. But Elena, they have thousands of years of advancement on us. Even with our rapid progress, we're still fighting with sticks and stones compared to their arsenal." Elena nodded. She had expected this assessment. "What about the other projects?" Harrison opened his folder and pulled out several reports. "The quantum communication network is operational across all human colonies. We can now coordinate instantaneously across light years, which gives us a significant tactical advantage. The new energy weapons based on Council plasma technology are being mass-produced, and our shield systems are approaching Council standards." "And the secret projects?" Harrison's expression grew more serious. "Project Prometheus is progressing well. We've successfully weaponized human creativity and unpredictability into our AI warfare systems. The Council's own data suggests they've never encountered adaptive tactical algorithms like ours. Their military doctrine seems to rely heavily on overwhelming technological superiority rather than strategic innovation." Elena leaned back in her chair. Project Prometheus was humanity's biggest gamble, the development of warfare systems based on human psychological principles rather than pure technological advancement. Council species appeared to think in predictable patterns, following established protocols and strategies. Humans, on the other hand, specialized in chaos and adaptation. "What about Project Defiance?" "That's where things get really interesting." Harrison pulled out another document. "Our analysis of the cultural exchange disk has revealed something unexpected. The Council's own response to human art and music has been significant." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Significant how?" "Reports from our intelligence assets suggest that the disk has been studied extensively by Council anthropologists and cultural analysts. More importantly, it's been shared among several Council species, and the reaction has been profound. Apparently, human creative expression is unlike anything they've encountered." Elena felt a spark of hope. "Define unlike anything." Harrison consulted his notes. "Council species seem to produce art and music according to mathematical formulas and established patterns. It's technically proficient but entirely predictable. Human art, with all its emotional chaos and rule-breaking creativity, has apparently caused something of a sensation in Council academic circles. That's interesting, but I'm not sure how it helps us if they decide to attack." "That's where Project Defiance comes in. We've been using human artists, musicians, and writers to develop what we're calling cultural weapons. Information designed to disrupt council psychological patterns and introduce chaos into their ordered thinking. Elena stared at him. You're talking about psychological warfare on a galactic scale. Exactly. The Council's biggest weakness appears to be their reliance on predictable patterns and established hierarchies. They've never had to deal with a species that actively embraces chaos and change. We're preparing to flood their communication networks with human cultural content designed to overwhelm their ability to process and categorize information. The plan was audacious, risky, and completely insane. It was also perfectly human. How long before we're ready for a full-scale implementation? Elena asked. 6 months for basic deployment. 12 months for full galactic coverage. But Elena, we need to consider the possibility that this could backfire spectacularly. We're essentially planning to introduce cognitive viruses into advanced alien minds. We have no idea what the long-term consequences might be. Elena understood the risks, but they had run out of conventional options. Intelligence reports suggested that the Galactic Council was growing impatient with humanity's continued independence. Several Council military fleets had been repositioned closer to human space, and there were indications that a subjugation campaign was being planned. Continue with the project, but implement additional safeguards. We need to be able to control or reverse the effects if necessary. Harrison nodded and gathered his documents. There is one other development you should know about. What? We've received unofficial communication from several species within the Council itself. Apparently, not everyone agrees with the current approach to humanity. Elena felt her pulse quicken. What kind of communication? Encrypted messages through quantum channels, mostly scientific and cultural exchanges. It seems that exposure to human creativity has awakened something in certain council populations. They're questioning the rigid hierarchical structure that's dominated galactic civilization for millennia. This was unexpected and potentially game-changing. Elena had assumed that council unity was absolute, but the idea that human culture could create fractures within their society opened up entirely new strategic possibilities. How many species are we talking about? Hard to say exactly, but our intelligence suggests at least 3 minor council species and possibly 1 major civilization. The Velkari, who apparently required 1,000 years of council guidance, seem particularly interested in human approaches to independent development. Elena's mind raced with possibilities. If they could build alliances within the council itself, humanity's chances of maintaining independence would improve dramatically. Draft a response to these unofficial contacts, nothing that could be interpreted as seditious, but express our interest in cultural and scientific exchange. And James, I want to know everything we can learn about these species and their grievances with current council policies. After Harrison left, Elena returned to studying the intelligence reports. The situation was more complex than she had initially realized. Humanity's rejection of the Council's offering hadn't just surprised the galactic authorities, it had apparently inspired other species to question their own acceptance of subordinate status. The communication system on her desk chimed, indicating an incoming priority message. Elena authorized the connection, and a holographic image of Admiral Chen Rodriguez appeared above her desk. Director Vasquez, we have a situation developing in the Proxima system. Elena felt her stomach tighten. Proxima Centauri hosted one of humanity's newest colonies, but it was also dangerously close to Council space. What kind of situation, Admiral? A Council fleet has taken position just outside the system boundary. 12 heavy cruisers and what appears to be a dreadnought-class vessel. They're not making any aggressive moves yet, but they're definitely sending a message. Elena closed her eyes briefly. The pressure was mounting faster than expected. How long until our own fleet can reach Proxima? 36 hours with the new drive systems. But, Director, Our ships are still outnumbered and outgunned. If this turns into a shooting war, we're going to take heavy casualties. Understood. Deploy the fleet but maintain a defensive posture. And Admiral, implement Protocol 7. Rodriguez's expression grew grim. Protocol 7 was the code name for humanity's most desperate contingency plan, the systematic evacuation of outer colonies and the preparation for a fighting retreat to the inner solar system. Ma'am, are we sure we want to escalate to that level? Elena considered the question carefully. Protocol 7 would signal to the Council that humanity was prepared for total war rather than submission. It would also irreversibly commit them to a path of resistance that could end with the complete destruction of human civilization. Not yet, but prepare all the preliminary steps. I want our people ready to move if the situation deteriorates further. After ending the communication, Elena walked to the window of her office, which offered a view of Earth's orbital defense platforms. The massive weapons arrays and shield generators represented humanity's best hope of defending their home world. But even these impressive fortifications would only buy them time against a determined Council assault. Her personal communication device buzzed with an encrypted message. Elena recognized the sender, Dr. Sarah Chen, her counterpart in the Cultural Analysis Division. Elena, you need to see this immediately. We've had a breakthrough in analyzing Council psychological patterns. Elena authorized a secure connection, and Dr. Chen's excited face appeared on her screen. What did you find, Sarah? We've been studying the cultural exchange disc that we gave to the Council, specifically their analysis of human music. Elena, I think we've been approaching this all wrong. What do you mean? The Council isn't just studying our art, they're trying to replicate it, and they're failing spectacularly. Every attempt they've made to create human-style music or art has been technically perfect but completely soulless. They understand the mathematical structures, but they can't grasp the emotional chaos that makes it meaningful. Elena felt a spark of understanding. They're trying to systematize something that can't be systematized. Exactly. And here's the really important part. Their failure to understand human creativity is frustrating them on a fundamental level. For species that pride themselves on understanding and categorizing everything in the universe, our art represents a puzzle they can't solve. The implications were staggering. Elena had been thinking about human creativity as a weapon, but perhaps it was something even more powerful, a form of existence that challenged the very foundations of Council civilization. Sarah, what would happen if we exposed them to even more human cultural content? Not as weapons, but as genuine cultural exchange? That's what I've been thinking about. Elena, we might be able to trigger a paradigm shift in how they think about consciousness and creativity. The rigid hierarchies that hold their civilization together depend on the belief that intelligence follows predictable patterns. Human creativity proves that's not true. Elena felt pieces of a larger strategy beginning to fall into place. Humanity's strength wasn't their technology or their military capabilities, it was their fundamental unpredictability, their refusal to accept limitations, and their capacity for chaos and change. Draft a proposal for a massive cultural offensive. Not psychological warfare, but genuine cultural exchange designed to demonstrate the value of creative chaos. And Sarah, I want you to coordinate with our unofficial contacts within the Council. If there are species already questioning the established order, we need to give them something to rally around. The next several hours passed in a blur of strategic planning and communication coordination. Elena found herself at the center of a complex web of military, diplomatic, and cultural operations unlike anything in human history. As she worked, reports continued to flow in from across human space. The Mars shipyards were accelerating production schedules. Colonial defense forces were mobilizing. Scientists and artists were collaborating on projects that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. But perhaps most importantly, The unofficial communications from dissident council species were increasing in frequency and boldness. The seeds of doubt that humanity's cultural offerings had planted were apparently taking root in unexpected places. Elena realized that what had started as humanity's rejection of an alien ultimatum was evolving into something much larger. They weren't just fighting for their own independence anymore. They were accidentally triggering a revolution in galactic civilization itself. The Council had offered humanity advancement in exchange for submission. Instead, humanity was about to offer the galaxy something they had never experienced before: the possibility of growth through chaos, innovation through independence, and strength through diversity. As the night shift took over the operations center, Elena remained at her desk, coordinating the most complex and ambitious campaign in human history. Outside her window, the stars seemed brighter than usual, as if reflecting the fires of change that were beginning to burn across the galaxy. The Council had wanted to guide humanity's development according to their ancient patterns and established hierarchies. They were about to discover that humans had their own ideas about how civilizations should grow. Admiral Zethkri stood in the command center of the Council flagship Divine Order, watching the tactical displays with growing confusion and frustration. 6 months had passed since the failed diplomatic mission to Earth, and the situation had spiraled completely out of control. "Report," he commanded his tactical officer. "Sir, the human fleet is holding position around their colony world, but they're not responding to our demands for surrender. More concerning, we're detecting massive communication traffic throughout this sector. The humans appear to be broadcasting on every available frequency." Zethkri studied the displays showing the 12 human warships facing his fleet of 47 Council vessels. By any rational calculation, this should have been over before it started. Human technology was still centuries behind Council standards. Their ships were smaller and less powerful, and they were vastly outnumbered. Yet something was wrong. The humans weren't behaving like any primitive species he had ever encountered. "What's the nature of their communications traffic?" "That's difficult to explain, sir. They appear to be transmitting what our analysts believe is cultural content: music, visual art, literature, philosophical discussions. It's being broadcast simultaneously in dozens of languages from hundreds of different human colonies." Zethkri felt a chill of unease. "Are they attempting some form of psychological warfare?" "Unknown, sir. But we're already seeing concerning effects among our own crews. Several Council species are requesting access to the human transmissions for analysis, and there have been reports of unusual behavior in our cultural analysis departments." This was getting worse by the moment. Zethkri had come here to conduct a simple subjugation operation against a primitive species that had refused Council guidance. Instead, he was facing an incomprehensible enemy that seemed to be fighting a war unlike anything in galactic history. "Sir," interrupted another officer, "we're receiving priority communications from Council Command. Admirals Velthara and Kunim are requesting permission to enter the battle zone." Zethkri's confusion deepened. Velthara commanded the Velkari contingent of the Council fleet, while Kunim led the Zephyrian naval forces. Both species had been part of the Council for centuries, reliable members of the galactic community. Why would they need permission to enter an operational zone during a subjugation campaign? "Grant them access and request immediate conference." Within minutes, the holographic images of both admirals appeared on his command bridge. Velthara was tall and graceful, her species known for their analytical minds and precise thinking. Kunim was shorter and broader, representing a species prized for their engineering capabilities. Both looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Admirals," Zethkri began, "your timing is excellent. We're prepared to begin the subjugation of the human colony. Your additional firepower will ensure quick victory." Velthara and Kunim exchanged glances before Velthara spoke. "Admiral Zethkri, we need to discuss the situation before any aggressive action is taken." Discuss what? The humans have refused council authority and must be brought into compliance. That's what we need to discuss, Kunim interjected. Admiral, have you reviewed the human cultural transmissions they've been broadcasting? Zethkri felt his irritation rising. I don't have time for alien art analysis. We have a military operation to complete. With respect, sir, Velthara said carefully, you should make time. The content the humans are sharing has raised significant questions among our populations about council policies and structures. This was completely unprecedented. Zethkri stared at the two admirals, trying to understand what they were telling him. Explain. Velthara took a deep breath. The human approach to creativity, innovation, and social organization represents paradigms that many of our species have never encountered. Their art doesn't follow mathematical patterns. Their music contains emotional structures we can't replicate. And their literature explores concepts of individual freedom and chaotic growth that challenge fundamental council assumptions. So, Kunim continued, significant portions of our populations are questioning why they've never been allowed to develop these capabilities independently. The humans' refusal to accept council guidance has inspired other species to examine their own relationship with the established hierarchy. Zethkri felt the universe shifting around him. Are you telling me that exposure to primitive human culture has created seditious thoughts among council species? Not seditious, Velthara corrected gently. Evolutionary. Admiral, what if the Council's approach to galactic civilization has been preventing rather than promoting true development? The question struck Zethkri like a physical blow. The Council system had maintained peace and order across the galaxy for thousands of years. Advanced civilizations guided primitive ones, ensuring stability and preventing the chaos that had marked earlier galactic eras. The human transmissions, Kunim added, suggest that chaos and independence might actually be necessary for genuine progress. Their rate of advancement since refusing our offering has been extraordinary. Zethkri turned to his tactical displays, reviewing the intelligence reports on human development. The data was undeniable. In just 6 months, humanity had made technological leaps that should have taken decades. Their energy systems were approaching council efficiency, their weapons technology had advanced dramatically, and their starship designs were incorporating innovations that council engineers had never considered. Sir, his communications officer interrupted urgently, we're receiving transmissions from across council space. Multiple species are requesting formal discussions about modification of current integration protocols. The situation was spiraling beyond anything Zethkri had prepared for. What had started as a simple military operation was apparently triggering a crisis in galactic civilization itself. Admiral, Velthara said softly, perhaps we should consider that the humans' rejection of our offering wasn't ignorance or arrogance. Perhaps it was wisdom. Before Zethkri could respond, alarms began sounding throughout his flagship. The tactical displays lit up with new contacts, dozens of ships emerging from hyperspace around the perimeter of the battle zone. Report. Sir, we have massive fleet movements. Ships from 16 different council species are taking positions around the engagement zone. They're not responding to authority challenges, and they're broadcasting demands for a ceasefire. Zethkri stared at the displays in shock. Nearly half the Council's member species were apparently defying military command authority. The neat lines of hierarchy that had governed galactic civilization for millennia were crumbling before his eyes. Admiral Zethkri, came a new voice over the communication system. This time it was Admiral Chen Rodriguez of the human fleet, her image appearing alongside those of the other commanders. I believe we need to talk. Humans surrender immediately, or face the consequences of your defiance, Zethkri responded, though even as he spoke the words he realized how hollow they sounded. Actually, Admiral, I think we're past the point of surrendering. Your own people seem to have some questions about this whole situation." Rodriguez gestured, and the tactical display updated to show the positions of all the fleets in the system. Council forces were still numerically superior, but they were clearly divided. Nearly half were maintaining neutral positions rather than supporting the subjugation operation. "Admiral Zethkri," Velthara spoke again, "I'm formally requesting a halt to military operations pending a full council review of integration protocols." "As am I," added Kunim. Similar requests began flooding in from other fleet commanders. The united front that Zethkri had counted on was fragmenting in real time. "This is mutiny," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "No," Rodriguez replied. "This is evolution. Admiral, 6 months ago your council offered us advancement in exchange for submission. We chose independence instead, and look what happened. We didn't just advance our technology, we advanced our thinking. And apparently we weren't the only ones ready for that kind of growth." Zethkri looked around his command bridge, seeing uncertainty and doubt in the faces of his own crew. The rigid certainties that had governed his entire existence were cracking under the pressure of human unpredictability. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked. "A new approach to galactic civilization," Rodriguez answered. "Instead of advanced species controlling primitive ones, what if we collaborated as equals? Instead of enforcing conformity, what if we celebrated diversity? Instead of preventing chaos, what if we learned to use it as a tool for growth?" The concepts were so foreign to everything Zethkri had been taught that he struggled to process them. Galactic civilization required order, hierarchy, control. Without these structures, there would be chaos, conflict, and destruction. But the evidence surrounding him suggested otherwise. The human cultural transmissions had apparently sparked innovation and questioning throughout council space. Species that had been stagnant for centuries were suddenly showing signs of new creativity and independent thinking. "Sir," his science officer reported, "we're receiving detailed analyses of human technological development from our research vessels. The rate of innovation is unlike anything in recorded galactic history." "Show me." The displays updated with comprehensive technical reports. Human energy systems had improved by 300% in 6 months. Their starship designs incorporated hybrid technologies that combined council principles with entirely new approaches. Most remarkably, their rate of innovation was actually accelerating rather than stabilizing. "How is this possible?" Zethkri asked. "Freedom," Rodriguez replied simply. "When you don't have to follow established patterns, you can explore possibilities that pattern followers never consider. When you're not afraid of failure, you can take risks that lead to breakthroughs." Velthara added, "The humans have demonstrated that chaos and independence can be more productive than order and control under certain circumstances." Zethkri felt the foundations of his worldview shifting. Everything he had believed about galactic civilization was being challenged by the evidence before him. "Admiral Zethkri," Rodriguez continued, "we're proposing a new kind of galactic community, one where species collaborate rather than dominate, where diversity is valued rather than eliminated, where growth comes through freedom rather than control." "And if I refuse?" Rodriguez smiled, but it wasn't a threatening expression. "Then you'll be left behind while the rest of the galaxy moves forward. Admiral, look around you. Half of your own fleet is already questioning the old system. The revolution has already started. The only question is whether you'll be part of it or be buried by it." Zethkri studied the tactical displays one more time. The mathematical certainties of military advantage were meaningless when half his forces were in open rebellion against their orders. The cultural infection that human creativity had introduced into council thinking was spreading faster than any biological virus. "What are your specific terms?" he asked finally. "No terms," Rodriguez replied. "Just an invitation to join something new. The Galactic Alliance instead of the Galactic Council. A community of equals working together instead of a hierarchy of dominance and submission. Admiral, Velthera added, my people have spent 1,000 years following council protocols. In the past 6 months, exposure to human creativity has led to more genuine innovation than we've experienced in centuries. Whatever the humans are offering, it's clearly more effective than what we've been doing. Zethkri looked around his command bridge one more time, seeing the faces of officers and crew members who had served the council faithfully for decades. They were waiting for his decision, but he could see in their expressions that they had already begun to change. The offering that the council had made to humanity had been rejected. In response, humanity had made an offering of their own, not technology or weapons, but ideas and possibilities that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about civilization and progress. Stand down all weapons, Zethkri commanded finally. Open channels for negotiation. The transformation of galactic civilization would not happen overnight, but in that moment, as weapons powered down and communication channels opened between former enemies, the first steps were taken towards something unprecedented in galactic history. A community based on cooperation rather than domination, growth rather than stagnation, and freedom rather than control. The humans had rejected the Council's offering of advancement through submission. In return, they had offered the galaxy something far more valuable: the possibility of advancement through liberation. As negotiations began and the foundations of the Galactic Alliance were laid, one truth became clear. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is not what they need, but the freedom to discover what they never knew they wanted. The Council's offering had been rejected, but humanity's response had triggered the greatest advancement in galactic civilization in recorded history. And it was only the beginning.